Hey, I'm Mark Stevens, author of Government Indicted. The website, of course, is markstevens.net or markstevens.net if you're from my neck of the woods. There, you're one of them Long Islanders. And I'm glad to have you here. It's the live edition of the No State Project for Wednesday, April 12th. I probably should have written that down. April 12th, 2017. It is episode 16 of the live edition of the No State Project, commercial free. We do the episodes, I don't know, we just started doing that to differentiate it from the regular broadcast, which is 3 hours of Anarchy Radio, which is every Saturday from 4 to 7 Eastern Standard Time on the Liberty Radio Network. That's LRN.FM, where we try to get in as many live broadcasts as we can. A lot of people out there looking to get help defending against these bureaucratic attacks, talking about traffic tickets, possession charges, stuff like that. And you go to markstevens.net, you can see the track record we have. That pretty good. It's pretty decent. We've had success on 3 continents. I know there's a lot of, and this reminds me of an email that I got today. And we'll start the show off with this. It's that there's a fatal flaw in my logic. And he says, I've been listening to you via YouTube for a week or so now and find them very interesting. Let me say first that I'm a conservative and not a libertarian or anarchist, but I think we share a fundamental distrust of government. While I applaud your successes in getting your clients out from under tickets, out from under tickets and tax liens, where am I? I think they are owed more to the basic bully mentality of government officials than the validity of your arguments. Let's face it, what do bullies everywhere do when faced with determined resistance? For the most part, they leave you alone and concentrate on easier prey. If you look at your failures, the cases where your clients have been convicted or forced to pay, it is where the judges in question have seen the actual flaw in your logic. You refuse to acknowledge the existence of axioms. No, I actually use one. The fact not appearing is presumed not to exist. They do, they do exist. I may or may not agree with particular ones, but I've never refused to acknowledge that they exist. I've never done that. I don't know what he's talking about there. In any logical discussion, there are maxims. Well, there can be. A maxim is a statement accepted as true as the basis for the argument or inference. I'm not going to go. The logical fallacy that all of your arguments fall prey to is, I've heard this before, reductio ad absurdum, or absurdium, in that you reduce your argument to the point where you question the axioms on which our system of laws and government are based. The key phrase in the Declaration of Independence is, quote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, end quote. In other words, these are the axioms on which we agree and establish our system of laws, and as such, they require no evidence. Well, certain principles don't, but whether those principles are being used to create something, they damn well do. So he says it's a basic tenet of logic. So he provides a syllogism. All elephants are gray. Gracie is an elephant. Therefore, Gracie is gray. I think we can agree that the syllogism is valid, but it relies on the fact that we know what an elephant is and what color they are. Your method of argument would say, hey, wait a minute, show me evidence that elephants are gray. They may not be. Show me evidence that Gracie is, in fact, an elephant. Your logic is flawed. Well, okay. Yeah. It may be a valid form of argument, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily true. Further, a judge could easily turn your logic around on you by simply saying, show me evidence that you have rights. If you can't demonstrate any evidence that you have rights, then the IRS can take your client's money anytime they like. They can get shot for it, sure. The concept of human rights is every bit the axiom that the concept of law is. So your logic demonstrates that all laws are arbitrary and thus invalid. Then it also demonstrates that rights are just as arbitrary and just as invalid. I'm not a That's why I questioned someone who called the last broadcast talking about animal rights and human rights. I'm really not an animal rights or a human rights kind of guy. I believe we have life, liberty, and property. I don't believe that we have the right to life, liberty, and property. Right is a legal claim, and the whole system is invalid. So the idea that using my logic and my analysis that it undermines the entire system of government, that doesn't invalidate or say that my position is invalid. It's supported by the evidence and the logic. That would be like saying if I was to use facts and logic to show that the Al Capone gang was a criminal organization. Well, reductio ad absurdum. I mean, you can't, you're invalidating the legitimacy of the entire organization. You can't. That's what logic and everything is supposed to be about. At least that's what I thought. But if I'm using, all I'm doing here is taking these principles. They're claiming that there's a political body, and I'm using their own principles against them. I don't see how that is a flaw in my logic. They're saying that there are citizens. They also say that citizens are members of the body politic owing a duty of allegiance in return for duty of protection. These are reciprocal obligations, one a consideration for the other. How is my asking for evidence flawed logic? It's this whole thing that, Mark, your question is invalid. It's argumentative. Asking for proof is not argumentative. Yeah, you can have a question that's considered argumentative, sure. Maybe you didn't establish your foundation enough before you asked the particular question. It's not as cut and dry. But this idea that my logic is flawed because it undermines the legitimacy of this organization that we call government? No. I'm not buying that for a second. I just don't see the flaw in the logic. Before I go on, the number here is, if you want to join the big show, it's 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. And didn't realize my head was going to get cut off. I didn't use the right chair, so no big deal. So 218-632-9399, the code to get in if they don't give it to you on the recording is 2020 with the pound sign or the hashtag for you millennials. 2020 and the pound sign. And you can also Skype me at Frank Rizzo 3. Instant message me first. Don't just call a live, during a live part of the show. You can get me at Frank Rizzo 3. That's Frank Rizzo with the number 3, and you can get on the show. So to get back to this, I agree that they're bullies, and I will agree that a lot of times, if not, a big part of why we get things tossed out is because it's impossible for the prosecution to meet the burden of proof. Some may want to say, well, it's just because you're making it too difficult for them. And I don't buy that as that my argument or my position has no merit, that when I'm asking for evidence to support the prosecution's claims, one, that's a basic tenet of any kind of defense, is to ask for the evidence the prosecution's claims are based on. To turn around and say, well, they're only throwing it out because you're making it so difficult. If the prosecution's case is so weak that asking them just to give you the evidence to support their claim is too hard, it's not, you can't paint with a broad brush and turn around and say that all of them are, they just didn't want to be bothered. They would rather do a deal. So whether you presented something that Clarence Darrow wrote for you or something like some idiot from Long Island, some schmuck from Long Island wrote, they didn't even read it. The fact that you challenged it to begin with was enough for them to throw it out. Well, I don't buy that, because if that was enough to get prosecutors to throw it out, that's what everyone would do that. You could just file anything and things would get thrown out. But this is not a matter of the prosecutor not even reading it and just reflexively, too much trouble. I don't want to respond to any motion at all. F you, screw it, no work for me. You have where prosecutors are responding to the paperwork. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's actually hilarious to see some of the responses that these people do. But they are reading it, and you have instances, and you can go to markstevens.net, you can see where judges have ordered them to respond to the motion or the discovery request. So the idea that they're not reading it, they're just reflexively withdrawing or throwing it out because it's too much trouble. No, I don't buy that. It's too much trouble because you're constantly hammering away at the prosecution's Achilles heel. They're making a claim, they have no evidence. It's not a matter of a reductio ad absurdum. I do not accept the situation. See, a fundamental flaw of logic is to presume that your proposition's true, or to presume that any of the propositions are true. You can presume that they're true just for the sake of determining whether it's a validly structured argument. But whether it's true in real life, no, not so much. I don't believe we should be accepting a sacred cow. The prosecution doesn't get a free pass. And everybody could just keep turning around and saying, but it's the law, it's the law, it's the law. You got to give me something more than that. That's not an argument that defeats the position. Just saying it's the law doesn't relieve a prosecutor or anybody of their burden to prove their claim. These laws apply. Where's your proof? It's the law. Yeah. And again, this is not just a matter of saying that there's a rule like do no harm. Show me the evidence that applies. Violate it. I have a natural justification to preserve my life. So if someone attacks me, it's morally justified. It's natural for me to counter that attack and stop it. But to turn around and try to equate that, the principle of do no harm, and try to equate that to pay me or I put you in prison, the hell's wrong? It's apples and oranges. It's not a fair comparison. The do no harm says leave me the hell alone because I have a natural justification to use physical violence and force against you to stop you. Writing down on a piece of paper, pay me or I hurt you, that's not the same thing as having a moral or ethical principle of do no harm. And if you think they're the same thing, it's beyond me to be able to really, instruct you on the differences there. It's not something that I think I need to dumb down to a point where the purpose of my show has to be to teach 3-year-olds. Anybody, that's just a basic fundamental thing. Writing things down on a piece of, and that's what it comes down to. So if you're one of these types whose laws don't need, I could just say this is the law. I wrote it down. I am king. What I say is law. If you don't like it, get the hell out of North America. This is my kingdom. Let me see what. So, I've addressed this many, many times. The success is not based on just the fact that we're making things so difficult for them and that there's no merit. The merit is very easily laid out. The burden of, and here we go again. Here we go again. This is the merit to what we're doing. Basic logic is when somebody makes a claim, they bear the burden of proof. That's not something I made up. It's the way logic works. This is what has brought us out of the Stone Age, basically, where it's brought us out of the Dark Ages. This is why we can have things like HD video recording that you can get simultaneously all over the world. The one who makes the claim bears the burden of proof. That's the way logic works. They are making a claim that a written instrument from 200 years ago applies to me just because I'm physically in Arizona. That's the claim. They are also men and women who just force us to pay them. Those are facts. Does forcing me to pay you create an obligation on me to perform in a certain way? Does that create an obligation of allegiance and protection? So we go by, let the data speak no matter what the data says. Okay. All right. The data before us is, and it's true whether it's 1776, 1787, 1871, or 2017. The data is they're men and women forcing us to pay them. That's the data. That's the most relevant data. Now, you can turn around and say, it's not just that, they build roads. But then when you're talking about me as an individual man forcing someone to give me their money, you have to take into account when we're looking at the data, then you have to take into account if I'm doing anything good for the victim, a perceived good for the victim, before you make your decision up, your mind up. But it still shouldn't even change. They are just men and women forcing us to pay them. Now, does that data justify or prove that there are reciprocal obligations of allegiance and protection? Does that data prove that? And you can say, well, they build the roads. Okay, we'll throw that in there. They're men and women forcing us to pay them, and a fraction of that stolen money is used to build the roads. Now, does that data prove that a duty of allegiance and protection were created? You see, that's what it comes down to. That's not a matter of reductio ad absurdum. We're looking at the facts. We're looking at things we can actually prove. We're stripping out all the political crap. A maxim is one of the axioms or maxims I agree with. And that happens to be the one who makes the accusation bears the burden of proof. I agree with that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. But what also exists as an axiom or a maxim, the fact not appearing is presumed not to exist. And if the data is not there, the data is not there. So there's a Latin phrase for that. I apologize, I'm looking for that now. Where do we got that? So what do we have here? And that's very important, because what you want to do when you are trying to justify government and say and assume that this is a real organization, instead of challenging the foundation on which it's based, and looking at the maxims, comparing it to the actions. Here we go. Quod non apparent non est. The fact not appearing is presumed not to exist. And if you're going to make a claim, you got to support it. The fact that you're going to hurt me, the fact that you're going to put people in prison, or the fact that you're going to build a really nice road does not relieve you from the consequences of those actions. If I am a criminal because I force perfect strangers to give me money, but I turn around and take with that stolen money and give them something back, and so it seems like I'm doing them giving them a benefit, that does not change the fact that I'm a crook. If I want to do something nice for somebody, it has to begin and end with not attacking them. It has to start and end with do no harm. The fact that this idea that, well, they build the roads, I've mentioned this on the show so many times. It's called emotional manipulation. All they're trying to do is excuse the violence, the criminal nature of their act. But it's legal. I don't care. I don't care. It doesn't matter in logic. Of course, a band of criminals are going to legitimize their thefts. But we know from logic, again, we're going to use logic. We're not going to use just their rules, because their rules are going to justify their crimes. A double standard is a logical fallacy. So if you have two people, if you have a group of people here and a group of people over there, and the principle of do no harm, or that forcing others to give you money is wrong, that it's considered in a lay sense it's criminal. You are a criminal. And then turn around and say, well, because this group forced themselves on this other group, that rule doesn't apply to them. It's a double standard. It's called special pleading. It's saying that the rules don't apply to everybody. And that's wrong. Now, am I outnumbered in that? Yeah. But I'm not making an appeal to popularity. And I know from most people I speak to, pretty much everyone, whether they want to be honest and answer all the questions, will insist that if I force them or anyone else to give the money, I'm a crook. All I'm saying here is that most of us, I think, when you're being honest, will agree that if it's wrong for me or you to do it, it's wrong for some scumbag named Trump or some piece of garbage named Obama or some psychopath named Hillary. But here in this email, what the guy's doing is presuming that the government exists. He's presuming that it's a legitimate organization. He's presuming all these things. And he's misleading here, saying that I refuse to acknowledge axioms. No, I don't. But if that axiom is contradictory to the facts, or that axiom is trying to justify facts that tell a different story, where the facts are, this is robbery. The facts are, this is kidnapping. This is false imprisonment. When your maxim, whatever it happens to be, tries to justify that, then I got a problem with it. Why should I be bound by the logic that of somebody who is trying to justify a criminal organization? I don't buy it. Not every axiom is going to be applicable to every situation, and not every axiom is going to hold water anymore. But two that do. The one who makes the claim bears the burden of proof, and the fact not appearing is presumed not to exist. Those are going to hold some water. And those are going to hold water with people who are honest. And also, this thing about, this is a legal maxim, all equal under the law. Yeah. I know, it's funny. And it shouldn't be. But anyone who's ever been to court knows full well, anyone who's ever watched the news knows full well, there are two sets of laws. And I'm not talking just about the mega rich, the affluenza, where a kid killed somebody, drunk driving, I think it was, and he couldn't handle prison well. I'm talking about when you see people call government who lie, steal, and kill other people and get away with it. No prosecution at all. Bradley Manning goes to prison, and the murder that he uncovered, the murder that they uncover goes unpunished. Oh my gosh, Charlie Murphy dead at 57. That's terrible. Leukemia. Oh. Well, that puts a damper on the show. Charlie Murphy! Oh, my wife just informed me that Charlie Murphy, the brother of Eddie Murphy, passed away at 57 years old, battling leukemia. Wow. That kind of sucks. Wow, it's been, we had Mr. Warmth, Don Rickles, but he was 90 years old. So, okay, where do you go from there? Oh, let me go back to the email. So I don't refuse to acknowledge the existence of axioms. I refuse to accept that they're always valid, and it has to, the logic has to still be there and be applicable. Yeah, so the logic has to be applicable to the situation. Of course, every case is fact specific, and we have to look at what we're talking about there. So, and of course, the concept of human rights, and this is something I've gone through many times. I think I may have mentioned that in the broadcast, so maybe I don't have to repeat that. But he gives the hypothetical here. And this is the one where everyone thinks that I'm going to defeat the anarchist logic. I'm going to completely defeat this. I'm going to prove that there's a government by asking one hypothetical. Suppose your wife was murdered, and at trial his lawyer got him acquitted by saying, "Show me evidence the Constitution laws apply to my client." Okay. You know what? If someone in my family was murdered, that wouldn't justify government. If someone was murdered in my family, that wouldn't make the system any more valid. So you can make the hypothetical, which is really just an appeal to emotion. It's no different than with a scumbag move when people say, You don't like torture? You don't think that torture's good? You don't think they should do the enhanced interrogation? Yeah, what if they had your baby? What if they had your mother? Is it still wrong to torture them? Yeah, if you're so desperate to make an argument that torture is good, you can come out with some ridiculous thing to strike at someone's emotions so that they'll make an unethical choice in that moment because they're so desperate to save their family. That's all that is. What about murder? That wouldn't make, just because the Capone crime family saved your speakeasy from being burned to the ground, doesn't mean that they're a legitimate organization. They're still a criminal organization. So, yes, you can try to tug at my heartstrings by making such a personal thing. But no amount of trials, no amount of acquittals, no amount of political posturing is going to overcome the data, the hardcore, unimpeachable evidence. There is no government. You can come down off of your high horse. You can stop praying. You can stop making your syllogisms because they're just men and women forcing us to pay them. That's it. That's it. So your hypotheticals are not going to change that. The only thing that's going to change that is reality, is if they realize maybe we should offer our services on a voluntary basis. Why don't we actually provide these services in a means consistent with the stated goal or end? Let's make the means consistent with the end. So that's a syllogism that they, or a maxim or a principle that they forget. That if governments are instituted to protect life, liberty, and property, then why? Like I used to say on the show all the time, why are they the main ones, usually the first ones, that are threatening to take your life, liberty, and property, or your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? Well, they got to build their roads. Well, they're violating the end. Their means. This is why I wrote in Government Indicted. Why isn't there government? Why should we have a stateless society? Because with government, the end, the means conflict with the end. It's contradictory. For no other reason. That is why they should. That is why there should be a tax revolt, and that's why there should be mass noncompliance and put these charlatans, these criminals, out of business. But it's this kind of crap. Suppose your wife was murdered. It's not going to create obligations of allegiance or protection. So I put it to Dean, who sent me this email. I'm not going to respond to the email directly other than the link to the show. If that happened, my wife was murdered or my child was murdered, and there was an acquittal based on them not being able to show evidence that the Constitution and Code applied, would that make it a legitimate organization? Would that create? See, that's the problem with this ridiculous reductio ad absurdum, which only means I don't like your ultimate conclusion because that doesn't fit into my little box, which I've heard so many times. That is not being logical. That is not being rational. Tell me, if that happened, if your hypothetical scenario happened, would that make it a legitimate operation? Would that prove that there were reciprocal obligations of allegiance and protection? Would that prove that they were legitimate and I somehow was a con man and was wrong? Your hypothetical doesn't do anything to overcome the evidence. Just, and I actually had someone close to me, which is why I don't discuss anything political anymore, pull that crap. Well, if your children were being held and you had somebody that was believed to know where they were, you wouldn't torture them to find them? Please. If your argument is so invalid, if your evidence is so lacking, why don't you grow up and be an adult instead and let your perceptions and your map of the world, why don't you change your map of the world to conform more to the data than to try to flip it around and try to get the world to conform to your map of it? It's a lot easier that way. I remember reading in with Bantle and Grinder, I thought it was one of the most profound things I ever read from them, and I'm only paraphrasing here. A surefire recipe to keep yourself miserable, always, is to make a picture in your mind of how the world should be and then spend the rest of your life bitching, moaning, complaining because the world does not conform to that. It's different than saying that we see a problem here, that this is unethical and this is immoral, and this should be changed. Okay, not the same thing. I know we live in a stateless society now. I know that there are no governments. People only think that that's true. They act as if it's true. It's no different than with a corporation. People act as if there's a corporation. There isn't one. It's just people. It's a matter of breaking that conditioning. But it's so difficult for people, even people who say they're versed in logic, to come out with these things and not even see the flaws in their own logic. And I'm not saying mine's perfect, and I'm not saying mine doesn't have any flaws. I just don't think this guy has done a good job pointing any of them out. So that is the rabbit hole down which your logic leads. It's not a rabbit hole, and that's really in the sense that I think he's doing. Because if you apply that same logic, why defend against anything that's wrong? What I see here in this email is really nothing more than someone desperately trying to justify. And basically, like, what's the word? He's an apologist. He's there, like Sean Spicer, to justify all the things that other people are doing. And so he violates one of the basic principles of logic as I know it, and that is accepting a sacred cow. Why do I have to accept as valid the concept of government to begin with? Who said that? And why bring out just the Declaration of Independence? I don't talk about just the United States government here or the state governments. I talk about Canada, Australia, New Zealand. I talk about all of them. In fact, in Government Indicted, I have a chart listing the different types of government and show that they're all authoritarian. All of them. They're all criminal organizations. So ultimately, it doesn't even matter what it says in the Declaration of Independence. What the hell does that have to do with Australia being colonized and controlled and subjugated? Doesn't have a damn thing to do with that. Just because they thought those principles were true and didn't and that's the thing. You want to talk about contradictory, you bring up the damn Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal? Oh. Wealthy, landowning white people. Because obviously, even though that was a maxim, they didn't actually believe that. See, there's a thing. Maxims mean nothing if people don't conform to them. All men are created equal, but blacks are 3/5 of the person. They're 3/5 of a white man. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They got a lot of things right in the Declaration of Independence. Sure, of course. But all men are created equal? They didn't believe that. That was one of the things that got me about, as a kid, listening to George Carlin. I think I may have actually stolen his joke, or at least part of his joke there. Although it's kind of, simultaneous thinking. It's kind of obvious on that one. But I remember as a kid, when you're not questioning stuff like that. But as a kid, hearing that, like, oh. Another one, he says they want to ban the fake ones and produce more real guns. Yeah, ban the fake guns. That makes sense. So, And this is part of the problem that even people that I work with, new people, not everyone is coming to markstevens.net because they're anarchists. The majority are not. They're coming to markstevens.net because they're being attacked, and they want to learn how to effectively defend themselves so that they don't. So that even if they're going to wind up making a deal, it's going to save them $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 because they make a deal just as well on their own. They have I'm not, so there's a problem giving up something that you were born with. And we've talked about this on the show many times. It's a cultural thing. It's something that's handed down through your family. Government good, freedom bad. You have to do it for the greater good. It doesn't matter how much Republicans shout at the top of their lungs, better dead than red. It doesn't matter how much they say they hate socialism. They embrace it when it's a socialism they can get behind, like the military. Got no problem with that. And I've spoken how many times college football. They love their college football. But, the college football, yeah, that's a form of socialism. So they just like their type of socialism. It's like the Republican and Democrat, two hands on the same sick monster. But I don't want to waste time with that. But if we go into court, and you got to remember the three basic principles we're talking about here. Why we've been one of the reasons why we are so successful on 3 continents. Man, you can piss and moan and complain and say, it's got nothing to do with you, Mark. Yeah, okay. Oh, whatever. All right. These 3 basic principles that I don't think anybody of any rational mind would disagree with. You have to zealously challenge the claims that are being used against you. That's just basic common sense. You have to challenge, if you're going to defend yourself, you have to challenge the claims that are being used against you. You should not give your accuser any sacred cows. Don't allow them to make a claim that you don't challenge. It doesn't matter what it is. Even if they're giving you the time, verify, and then verify. It's your defense. It's your life that they're invading there. So you need to be challenging every single claim that they're making. Now, it stands to reason that for number 3, we realize some claims carry more weight than others. You have it where anytime someone's building a case, you have to build it logically, rationally. You have to build your foundation because your foundation is going to set the relevance. What the hell did my being in Gilbert, last Tuesday? What the hell did that have to do with anything? So if you haven't built your foundation, you can't show the relevance, and if you can't show the relevance later, if you're in court, you can't even consider it. So the relevance, the single most important claim that these criminals are making is if you're physically in Arizona, their rules apply to you. Again, we're not talking do no harm, because that's something we can all get behind, and we don't have to. That's just a basic principle of living. To not hurt other people. We learn that by the time we're 4 or 5 years old through experience. We don't need it hammered into our head. We understand that. We don't need any, it would be redundant. It's redundant to keep mentioning it. We know. The only reason we keep mentioning it is because people don't want that to apply to everyone across the board. That's why it keeps getting repeated. But we get that this is the foundational claim that sets the relevance for everything else the prosecution's going to say. He didn't have a driver's license. Who gives a damn if I don't have a driver's license? Is that relevant if there's no proof the Constitution and Code apply to me? The answer is no. Now, if you're accepting a sacred cow, if you're going to give the prosecution a pass on that for whatever reason, I think Mark's an idiot. I get that all the time. Why? You're an idiot. What is idiotic about challenging the prosecution's claim? Even if they can overcome your challenge and actually meet their burden, why would you still give them a pass on it? Yeah, I'm going to give the prosecutor as easy a time as possible over here. I'm going to just, I'm going to take the single most important element of his case against you, and we're going to give it to him. Going to just give it to him. Oh, and by the way, murder is not necessarily against the law. It's not like there's a separate statute for that. There's a classification. Depending on where you are, there's a classification of a felony and the punishment you get for it. But it's completely redundant to pass a law that murder is wrong. We need politicians to tell us killing others is wrong. Yeah. Okay, so that's why it's very important to get back, why it's very important not to accept a sacred cow, because you should not be giving the prosecutor an easier time to prosecute you, especially when it's the foundation of his case. And for those who are new and not aware, most of the time that they're prosecuting us, it's for a mala prohibita. We're not talking about a real crime. We're talking mala in se is the act in question is wrong on it because of the nature of the action, because it violates the principle of do no harm. It's harmful. So you have your rape, murder, robbery, fraud. These hurt other people. What I'm talking about where most of the charges that we see are mala prohibita. The act is inherently innocent. It doesn't hurt anybody. I'm not talking about firing a gun in the air either. I'm talking about taxation. I'm talking about getting licenses. I'm talking about all this regulatory crap where there's no victim. Selling cigarettes without a license. Or, whatever they call that. These acts are only wrong because a politician said so. And that conflicts with their own maxim that no injury, no harm, no foul, no injury, no case. And it's another thing I used to go into all the time. We still have it at markstevens.net. If a crime is an act and a result, how the hell would they have any case if there's just an act that they're punishing? Well, you had marijuana. Yeah, that's the act. What's the result, douchebag? Oh, yeah, there isn't one. So, you want to cling to axioms and maxims so much. Here, these criminals don't, but I'm supposed to. Yeah. I don't even know where that came from. I refuse to accept. I guess that's kind of the dodge that people take. Well, you just don't accept my answer. If I ask you for evidence and you don't give me evidence that actually proves a proposition is true, yeah, so if I say, hey, what is 5 plus 5, and you tell me 17, I'm not going to accept your answer. That doesn't mean that I'm thick-headed. It means you are, because for thinking that that's an answer. Well, you just won't accept anything I say. Could you imagine going into school and doing that? Just imagine maybe you're doing your thesis in some science class. You want to work for NASA or something like that, and you get your doctorate, and you're being questioned by the scientific team, and they're asking questions about your thesis, and they say, well, what about X minus Y? How does that work out? And you say, well, it's D, and they say, well, that's not correct. Well, I guess you just won't accept any answer that I give. When you put it into context of real world kind of stuff, it makes more sense. But that's what people tend to do. Well, Marc is just an idiot. He doesn't accept the answer that people give him. Well, let's look at some of those answers and why you should never accept these things in court. Well, your claim is, your claim is that just because I'm physically in Arizona, your Constitution, a written instrument, applies to me. Yeah, that's right. Do you have any proof that that's true? Yeah, you're standing right here. Yeah, I know, but what proof is there that it's written instrument applies to me because I'm standing right here? Yeah, you're standing right here. See, that's a proof by assertion fallacy where you're just repeating the argument. You're repeating the claim. I'm not going to accept that because it's not right. It's not the right answer. So what apologists have to do is just they put it on, they deflect. And they put it on me or you. Well, you're not willing to accept my answer. You're not willing to answer the question. And that's just a dishonest tactic. Well, I don't need evidence. Just like the one I did recently. I found out something that if you use Patrick Starr as your thumbnail, you're going to get a lot more views than usual. So I guess I had to find a reason to use Patrick Starr. Well, maybe I'm doing it right now. But I used it in that because I had a prosecutor say to me, I'm not prepared to answer that. But you need evidence to prove it's not true. See, and that's something that, I tell you, That's why it's important to understand your logical fallacies so that you know how to call someone out on their BS, especially when you're in court, because you hear nothing but BS when you're in court. I mean, they want to be able to argue without a shred of evidence. But are they willing to allow you and I to do that? I mean, this is a basic common sense thing. Like, wait a minute, what happened to that legal maxim? I read it was right above the court door when I walked in. All equal under the law. Why the hell does the prosecutor get to make arguments without evidence and I can't? Well, he's making an issue of law. Yeah, but I'm saying it doesn't apply. No, you need evidence. Double standard. And that's what you have to expect when you're dealing with people who do business at the barrel of a gun. This is why I say so often, it begins and it ends men and women forcing us to pay them. And everything else is just mental gymnastics and BS and using logical fallacies to try to get around the consequence of those facts and what those facts tell you. If you're going to say that a written instrument applies to me, you have to lay out your evidence. So without even saying first, is this a contract? If you lay out your evidence, well, I made an offer, it's written down over here. And I was going to do A in exchange for B. And so-and-so said, yep, I understand. I get it. I want to agree with you. Okay. So we'll sign this in front of witnesses. And so I'll be obligated to give you A, and you're going to be obligated to give me B. Okay. Now, those are the facts. What does the data tell you? It tells you that A is obligated, one is obligated to give A, the other is obligated to give B. They both agree to it because there is the evidence. What do they have? What does the data say there? We are men and women, and they're forcing everyone to pay them. And they have this written instrument where they put rules down. But no one signed it. So that's also another one of these big historical things that people miss. Mark, why do you keep going back to 1776? Because it's called logic. You're going back to when it started. Did anybody have a choice? Now, let's just say everyone had a choice on whether they accepted the Constitution or not. That's the form of the organization, not the organization itself. Not the same damn thing. Did anyone have a freely given choice whether these men and women were going to protect them or not? No. I can't do much else for the hearing impaired, but no. That's about it. It's kind of the extent. Well, I know a few more other signs, but yeah, I know this. I know that one. One that I don't do because I'm not an angry person, but the Sicilians, they'll get that. So remember, if you're being attacked, you have to challenge the prosecution's claims against you. And you have to hammer away incessantly at the foundation of that. That's just common sense. Because the only other things you're going to hear from people say not to do that is to, well, they don't have to prove that. We've already addressed that. We addressed that part. That's absolute nonsense. Don't accept it. But let me take one step. Someone did ask me recently, because, and this goes right to that claim, do not let their witnesses off the hook on this one. This goes to the personal knowledge. Somebody asked me recently in Alaska, why would the prosecution say their own witness was not qualified to testify? Why? Because I guess it's a matter of picking the lesser of the two evils. And because this is what tells me circumstantial evidence here. And yes, you could be convicted of things like murder on circumstantial evidence. Most convictions are probably on circumstantial evidence. It can be very strong. Why would a prosecutor impeach his own witness, the only witness he has against you? You're doing traffic. Why would he impeach him? Why would he say he was not qualified to give legal conclusions? Because he wants to avoid the police officer from answering the question. First, the two questions are, the second one is the one he won't be able to answer. So we'll go through that again. Mr. Police Officer, did you determine on your own that just because I was physically in Arizona, your constitution and laws applied to me, and you then had jurisdiction to investigate and charge me? Yep. You're damn right I did. You're damn right. Great. Do you have any proof that that's true? That's when the prosecution rises out of their chair and says, objection, calls for a legal conclusion. The witness is not qualified to testify. So the question being, why would a prosecutor do that and say his own witness who made legal determinations that you're there trying to prove are true? The prosecutor is not there trying to prove his accusation that you've broke the law is true. He's trying to prove the cop's allegation because he's the one that signed the ticket. Not the case every time, but still, if the prosecutor's making a claim against you, then he has to support that based on a witness with personal first-hand knowledge. He's got the police officer. He believes you broke the law because the cop told him that. So the cop has that personal knowledge. He rises out of his chair like that almost every time. Well, they almost always object. Because he knows the circumstantial evidence, what the circumstance tells me. Why would he do that and without thinking he's blowing his whole case? That was the question. If he's going to impeach his own witness, why would he do that and blow his whole case? He doesn't want the police officer to answer the question because that's more damaging. Especially, I think, in front of a jury. If he says, I don't know, now you can, you have no, so your claim that I violated the law is arbitrary. That looks pretty bad. Instead, they want to confuse people with their legalese. So they'll say he's not qualified to give legal determinations. So they want you to believe that the only one who's making any legal determinations in the world is some criminal with a black robe. Only judges give legal determinations. You are so full of crap. And if they say something like that to you, say, Fongo, you're lying. You are lying. I'm not saying he's giving I'm not asking him for a judicial determination or a judicial opinion. Just a garden variety legal opinion he makes every day. How many times have we got to say this? If you or I say, hey, you should not rob that bank, we are making a legal determination that's illegal to rob the bank and giving legal advice they shouldn't do it. Technically, that is a misdemeanor. Telling someone not to rob a bank because it's illegal is giving legal advice and is a misdemeanor. That's how stupid and consistent these people's rules are. I don't think you should do that. And yes, I know you're committing a crime either way. Misprision of a felony. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Hey, that's the logic of a system based on violence. Pay me or you go to prison. That's what you're justifying here. And it's old. All they're trying to do is justify, pay me or go to prison. Paulie, F you, pay me. You're trying to justify F you, pay me. That's your position there. Well, what if your wife was murdered and Paulie's attorney got the killer acquitted, saying that Paulie's laws don't apply? No, F you, pay me. That's all you're trying to justify. Just ridiculous. So the reason why the prosecutor can impeach his own witness is because he knows the judge is going to back him up. Now, if they allow you a defense after, if they have just denied effective cross-examination. Why? Because an effective cross-examination goes to competency. You have to be able to challenge the competency and credibility of the witness. You have to be able to challenge him on all their prior statements. The first question you ask, he made a legal conclusion. It is mind-boggling to me how unbelievably dishonest people have to be to turn around and actually say the police officer is not qualified to make legal determinations, even though that's why you're there that day. So look, it keeps coming up. I got to keep repeating it. Cross-examination is critical, absolutely critical. If you want to push them into a position where they're under no circumstances are they going to acquit you, you're going to have a serious reversible error. And denial of effective cross is going to be that reversible error. You don't have to show that anything different would have happened. You don't have to show any prejudice at all. It's so obviously wrong that the cop, look, the cop gave the legal conclusion in the first question you asked him. He gave legal conclusions all through the direct. The legal conclusion started the whole thing. And they do it because they're in bed. They know they are partnered up with the judges. Well, I've seen judges just tear prosecutors apart. That doesn't matter. They're on the same team. You can see members of the same team beat the hell out of each other. Anybody who's ever done one of these damn softball leagues, people on the same team will go after it. That doesn't mean they're still not playing for the same team. So just because a judge tears a prosecutor a new one doesn't mean they're not on the same team. Well, Mark, where's your evidence? Gee, county attorney, he works for Maricopa County, and justice of the peace. He's a county employee. Same team. Oh, they're in different departments. Oh, good Lord, if you think that's enough. Ay. They won't allow us to get away with that. So that's another thing that I recommend people doing. If they let that cop on the stand and they let him testify and they actually say he's not qualified to do those to give that testimony, you call someone up and see how much Rule 602 applies, how much that prosecutor wants that rule to apply. He's not going to allow you and I to get away with that kind of crap. Okay? So when the police officer does say, hey, I saw you in Arizona, the laws apply, you violated, those are several legal conclusions. If he's not qualified to make those legal conclusions, they're supposed to strike it from the record. But they know by doing that, they have to strike the complaint. And if you don't think a complaint can't be stricken, you've never filed anything against the IRS. I guarantee you can have a charging instrument stricken from the record. Absolutely, they can do that. And if the cop lied on the ticket, gone. And see, what it does is it destroys their probable cause or reasonable articulable suspicion. And if you can bust through that, now you got a huge due process error. But the judge, they bank on the judge backing them up and not striking the testimony. So you're going to have to grandstand a bit. You're going to have to bring up your own individual, someone from the peanut gallery. Because Rule 602 is pretty damn standard. The witness has to have personal first-hand knowledge of the matters they're testifying to. First-hand knowledge can come out through evidence given, elicited on direct or cross-examination. That's true. That is true. But they have to actually have the evidence, and they're not supposed to surprise you with it. So again, we're pretty much out of time here for episode 16, and we will not be live this week on the Saturday show, so hopefully we get something pre-recorded for that. But this has been episode 16 of the No Stay Project, or April 12th, 2017. But, or was I saying that the judge... Yeah, I kind of lost my train, but we are completely out of time. Actually, I'm very surprised. We didn't have any callers, so I guess it was a good thing that I had that ridiculous email. Although, no, I shouldn't say that. I apologize for that. It was a good try. But I don't think my logic is flawed because I'm pointing out the evidence. And even if my analysis shows that what is called government is completely illegitimate and criminal, that doesn't mean... That itself doesn't show it's a flaw. You have to look at the logic and the evidence that got me there, and I think that's unimpeachable. They are just men and women forcing us to pay them. So if you are being attacked by them, don't allow any sacred cows with these people. Challenge everything, including and really hammering away at the prosecution's claim that sets the foundation for the rest of the claims. Nothing else is relevant unless that is proven, and do not let them get away with trying to say they don't have to prove that. If they say that, you object, and you say, so I can argue without evidence too. Really, that's the kind of venue that we're in. you'll find out real fast that they have a double standard, and that's not fair. Again, my name is Marc Stevens. The website, markstevens.net. This is the 16th live commercial-free episode of the No State Project. I will do my best to get this, the HD video of this, not this crap you're looking at right now, to get that posted as soon as possible. So till next time, salud.